Everybody, Mayor Lou Manzo here, hoping that you're all doing well as we are now in hopefully a transition phase back to some sense of normalcy. The big focus right now is on the vaccine supply and that ramping up. And I know that I'm hearing from a lot of you in reference to that, especially over the last week or two, where we have seen the supply increase. And it's going to kind of go in little peaks and valleys week to week, but 2, 4 weeks from now, hopefully it'll be a consistent flow. And over the course of April and May, we fully expect that there will be ample supply for everybody who wants to get a vaccine to be able to get a vaccine. So this is great news. And continue to reach out to me if you have any questions. You know, always appreciate that and love the feedback and input and love answering the questions, actually. So in the reference to answering questions today, I'm going to bring in a special guest in a minute, Dr. Missy Peretti from the superintendent of Harrison Township Elementary School, who we're sitting down with her today because there's some big plans going forward in the next month or so at HTS and PVS. And she and I were speaking last week, and she wanted to take the opportunity to be able to share that with the public as a whole. So I'd like to welcome Missy. Hi, Missy. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Very well, very well. So I want to thank you for spending a few minutes with us today. I know you and I, we speak from time to time, and last week we had a conversation about, what your potential plans were going forward and for the rest of the school year, and then obviously beyond that. And you thought it was a good idea, and I agreed that beyond your parents, who are all in direct contact with you through the students and emails and so forth, and they're up to speed on what's going on. So everybody in kindergarten through sixth grade is going to be fully aware of everything even before we talk about it. But the community as a whole, and as you said, families and parents of kids that aren't in school yet, so under school age, and certainly those other members of the community, even our, seniors in our community, are always interested in what's happening and how our school district is handling this entire, situation. So that's the purpose of getting together today. I want to thank you for taking the time, and I'm going to, start right out by just answering, asking the basic question, which I think a lot of people are thinking about is, what has it been like this school year, which now we're, closing in on the end of it, for our elementary school students, and how has it been, different? What has worked, and maybe what have been some of the, challenges that you wouldn't normally see in a regular year?
Well, we've attempted to make the school experience for those children who have chosen in-person learning or hybrid model as normal as possible. But as you can imagine, I think that has been difficult with just the general place that we're in. And we're really focused on the importance of public health, obviously. So as we were planning last summer, we tried to keep all of those priorities in mind. So since September, we have been on a half-day schedule, which is basically very similar to what we've had historically as an AM and PM just kindergarten we've had. We actually extended that through sixth grade. So those students with the last name A through L come in the morning for in-person instruction, and then those students M through Z come to school in the afternoon. And while the students are here, they are being instructed in person in reading and mathematics. And then on the opposite half of the day that they are not physically in school, they experience science, social studies instruction, as well as all of their special areas and any interventions that they have as part of their educational plan. They experience that virtually. So it allows the kids to be in school for those two subjects of reading and mathematics and have that daily contact with teachers 5 days a week, which we really thought was important, particularly for the elementary school student. And those students who have chosen hybrid, which is right around 375 students total, that chose virtual, they have a similar schedule. So they have reading and mathematics live with their teacher, although it is virtual. They have that live with their teacher for half the day, and then the other half, their day looks very much like the students who have that hybrid experience. So we kept the two educational plans, whether families chose in-person learning or virtual, as similar as possible.
So the parents, the families had that choice going in and leading into September. And just for those of us that don't know the entire, student body number, 375 you mentioned, chose the virtual only. K through 6 is a total of how many students?
About 1,400 students.
Okay, so about 1,000 or just over 1,000 chose the hybrid version that you just described, and
Hmm.
under 400 went with the virtual only. So,
Yes.
and again, I don't want to go off on too many tangents, but as I'm thinking about this, what comes to mind is it's different in every school system in the state had their version of this, and they had to submit a plan and so forth. But school districts are different. So, for example, even in our own county, not everyone did what you did, correct?
That's correct.
So maybe some of them, as we heard, especially maybe at the higher level, as far as seventh grade and above, middle and high school, some were virtual only right from the get-go, completely.
Um, yes, for a lot of different reasons, I think our school districts went in many different directions. And looking specifically at our district, meaning an elementary district compared to a secondary districts that service middle school and high school, I think a real challenge for the superintendents that are leading secondary school districts is the necessity for our professional staff at that level to have individualized certifications. So with an elementary setting, we have teachers that are qualified and certified to teach all subject areas generally.
Mhm.
And in the high school level, that looks a little different. So the teacher who is certified to teach a physics class is not the same teacher that's certified to teach a mathematics class or a language class at that level. So they really had to focus on the needs of keeping the students in a cohort with all of those different variables that they had to weigh in. Elementary has been very different because one of the directions from the state was to keep the kids together in a cohort for as much of the day possible. And with an elementary setting, that is just an easier task from a scheduling standpoint to keep the kids together. So we had that certainly on our side in keeping the kids on the 5-day-a-week schedule, which again, we thought was really important, even though it's an amended schedule and it's a shortened day, getting that contact with their teachers, whether it was in person or even with our virtual students, to have that live contact, like the conversation that you and I are having, that one-to-one communication with the teacher directly live was really important for the district. And it was certainly a top priority for us with the kids at this age.
Yeah, it makes sense. So obviously all of that was, triggered and connected to the health aspect of this COVID virus and keeping people safe. So overall, what would you say that, the health, the school district as a whole, the community as a whole, how did it fare from a health perspective?
From a health perspective, we certainly did very well. And that is certainly attributed to the teachers who welcome the kids in every day, our bus drivers who drive them here every day, the office staff, and certainly our custodians that are working every day to make sure that the facilities are as clean as possible during each session and certainly between sessions. We had 30 students in the district as of this. These are current numbers, 30 students in the district between the two buildings and 20 adult staff members. So for a total of 50, 30 kids and 20 staff members that we have that tested positive for COVID over the school year thus far from September to now. And that's information that we keep to ensure that we're communicating with the Department of Education and the Department of Health to make sure we're moving in the right direction and supporting public health overall. And if there were any concerns, we would certainly immediately respond to them. But I think looking at our total population that we service here every day in a public school, on and off the buses, in the classrooms, using the lavatory facilities, 30 students and 20 staff members, I think that overall we've remained healthy, which obviously continues to be our first priority.
So it proves that the process and safety protocols you put in place in the four walls clearly worked.
Yes.
Percentage-wise and out in the general public, obviously. The safest place, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I've said the safest place to be is in a school.
Mm-hmm.
So again, there's differing opinions, but the facts bear out. That's what, that's how it played out. So as far as going forward, what is the next phase of the restart and recovery plan for both HTS and PVS?
Well, as I mentioned first at the February Board of Education meeting, and since then I've had a fairly large, including parents and various members of our staff. I discussed that our next step toward more normalcy would be to open for all students who choose in-person learning for 5 full days of instruction, which would mean that students would come up from September to now. Students in both buildings were actually transported together to school, so we were on the same time schedule. So now moving toward a full day, we would go to how HTS and PBS have run historically, meaning just the PBS students would be dropped off first, followed by the HTS students, and they would be here for the full 6 hours of instruction in all subject areas, including special areas, lunch, recess. So that is a major difference from what the kids have been experiencing since September, but that would be our next step. Continuing to keep the direction from the CDC, which focuses on mitigation strategies. Recently, the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, has released a statement that it is critical for students to open as safely and as soon as possible. And they also reference that it's the school's job to ensure that we're implementing actions to slow the spread of COVID-19. We certainly understand, and we've understood since September, I just shared the number of cases, that it is going to be impossible for us to completely remove all risk of a virus being transmitted within our 4 walls of our schools. But it is our responsibility to ensure that we're implementing strategies to slow that spread as much as we possibly can. So we're looking to continue those strategies and those implementations and making adjustments to those. But it is important for us to get the kids back for a full day of instruction to start experiencing school on the full day as soon as we can, as safely as possible.
And what steps do you have to take in this transition to, be prepared, other than what you've already been doing the whole time, with this transition to coming back full time? What steps do you have to take to make sure that it's successful?
Well, many of the strategies that we've implemented will remain the same, but what I really think it is important for our community to know, and certainly our parents of our students and our staff to realize, is up till now, we have been able to keep the kids socially distanced in the academic environment, which is why we've only been bringing in half of the student population at a time. So there's only 9, 10, 11 kids in a full-size classroom, and they are distanced 6 feet apart. That is going to be the major difference. The kids will not be distanced 6 feet apart any longer in the classroom. So because we don't have them distanced, the CDC suggests some other implementations of the physical classroom that we can put into play to continue to protect the students and the staff as much as possible. But again, they're not going to be 6 feet apart. So we will be putting in physical barriers between the students and ensuring that the students, in most cases, will be facing all one direction, which are 2 suggestions that are coming out from health professionals, that the kids, if they cannot be distanced, should be separated by some kind of barrier and facing the same direction where possible. Of course, unless there's a barrier in front of them, if we're using the tables that you most often see in the primary level. So that's the big difference. Another large concern that we have moving forward, that we are charged with the responsibility of addressing, is that as of current time, from September till now, the students are never in our physical setting without masks on. Neither are the staff. So if students are being taken outside and distanced for mask breaks when appropriate and when the teacher is able to do that. But when they're in the school building, they are masked. They're here a full day, they're going to be unmasked while they're eating lunch. So we are working with NutriServe, who is our food service company, as well as the principals and the staff members, to really take a look at what the best options are and what has worked for other school districts who are feeding the kids or have been feeding the kids while they're present. So again, we're looking at separating the students with physical barriers. We would like them to have the opportunity to move to the cafeteria setting in smaller groups. So we're looking at some scheduling, so it won't be the entire grade level of 8 in-person classes in most grade levels, or 7 in some others. It won't be all of those students that will be in the cafeteria at one time. We'll implement some creative scheduling that half of the grade level will be outside at recess playing, while the other half is eating lunch, just so that we have extra space in the cafeteria. But it is important, again, the whole purpose here is to kind of talk about moving kids towards more normalcy prior to the end of the school year. So the use of our cafeteria space, particularly for our youngest learners. I know myself, I have a kindergartner in the district, and she has never been to the cafeteria in the school. So this will be a new experience for them. She's never been out with her class on the playground or utilizing that recess time for that kind of interaction with her classmates. Our students haven't gotten that yet. So we're looking forward to those experiences for them. But it's going to take some work on our part to ensure that it is, again, as safe as possible.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot. In talking to you, I hear you, we discuss it, and now having you kind of give an overview, I know that there's so many layers here. So really, one obvious question is what is driving the decision to take this step towards normalcy now?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a question I've gotten from a lot of stakeholders that are part of this process and these conversations, and that includes parents as well as our professional staff. Like, we've been doing well, and what we're doing is working. So we're taking this step now, and why are things different now compared to September or sometime between September and now? Like, what is driving this conversation? And I think the biggest thing driving the conversation is the release of the vaccine. We made these arrangements and we made these plans for opening school in September. And in my mind, as a superintendent, and certainly with conversations with other superintendents in this area and my staff in general, our thought was public school was charged with the responsibility of doing our part to protect public health. And our part to protect public health included us slowing the spread of COVID-19 to protect our most vulnerable in our population. So with the vaccine being released and being out, since January, the most vulnerable of our population in most cases have been vaccinated at this point. So that changes the conversation for school with that vaccine. And thank you to science for that opportunity for us to take a look at more normalcy for the kids. And additionally, with, again, our most vulnerable in our general population, speaking of public health, I've been working very closely with extremely supportive community members in getting our staff vaccinated as soon as possible. And recently, we've been notified by the Department of Education, our county superintendent, that the County Department of Education and the County Department of Health are working together to utilize the mega site at Rowan College of South Jersey to help get our staff members vaccinated as soon as possible. So to have these other organizations and our community members and outside offices working all together in tandem to get our teachers vaccinated as soon as they are eligible, not just Harrison teachers, but teachers across the county, is something that is not being offered in every county. So from my perspective, looking at getting our students back in the classroom for a full day as soon as possible and more normalcy, and getting especially our youngest learners to really experience a full day of school, which they have not done yet as young learners. The fact that we're able to get the vaccine out as quickly as we have gotten it out, and I fully expect it's going to continue to be offered to teachers at that same rate, I'm so thankful for that. Because that makes all of the difference in the world. That changes the conversation. While it's not required for the opening of schools and it's not necessary according to the CDC, it's certainly always been a priority of mine, and I know it's been a priority of the leadership of our community to get our most vulnerable population vaccinated as soon as is possible. I know it's a conversation among other superintendents. That's something that we've been focused on, and I'm just so thankful that we're able to move in that direction soon to get the doors open for the kids.
Yeah, and you and I, when we have these conversations, you tell me your, situation and things you're dealing with, and I often tell you what I'm dealing with, and I probably deal with that aspect, the most vulnerable members of the population, a little more than you would, because you're dealing with the other end of the spectrum. And so, yeah, I know that there are still people in our community and obviously beyond that are in that category that haven't gotten that shot yet. However, I think it's safe to say that we know that it's moving, rapidly in the direction of, you know, the capability to have all of them taken care of just in these next couple of weeks, I would say, few weeks. If you want a vaccine, you're going to be able to get a vaccine if you're in that category as that supply chain continues to ramp up.
Mhm.
So you mentioned just a second ago, the other members in the community and I guess the teachers and other professionals that you're dealing with or the stakeholders. So I know you've had several meetings leading up to this. You just didn't sit in a silo by yourself or with just a couple of your administrative staff to make this decision. So with all of that input, what obstacles can you predict or can you see clearly maybe in the plan potentially that you're going to have to deal with as you make this transition back to full in-class learning?
I think our biggest obstacles are, as I mentioned during one of the other topics that we were discussing, those times that the kids are maskless. That is a concern, a valid concern for our staff. It's certainly a valid concern for many of our parents. So it is imperative to me as a superintendent to put a plan in place, just like it was in September. It's not going to work. It's not going to be a successful plan if the stakeholders are not comfortable with it. So that certainly is an obstacle to ensure in this very difficult time, this historical time that none of us have experienced either personally or are in our professional positions, to help the people around us to be as comfortable as possible. Because we all know that if the adults are comfortable with the plan and can move forward and feel good about the decisions that we're making, then the children will be at ease. And that is certainly my concern, that the kids are able to come in school. The whole point of us going through this process is to get as normal possible experience for the kids. So if we are able to do that, it's going to require us ensuring that we put these plans into place to make sure that the adults are comfortable and can welcome them in a comfortable learning environment. Additionally, we really need to focus on transportation. It's going to require us rerouting our buses because, as I mentioned, we have all of the students, whether they are in HTS or PVS, either being transported and taken home in the morning, or if they're in the afternoon group, in the afternoon. That's very different than any way we've ever transported the kids, at least in the last 10 or 12 years here in Harrison.
Right.
So we have to go back to that traditional early morning run for the PVS kids, both in the morning and at the end of the day at 2 or 3 o'clock. So that is very different. We have to take into consideration which of those 375 or so virtual students will be coming back. So we're looking at about 185 or 190 of those 375 that actually want to come back to full day instruction as we transition to that full day instruction in April. So adding those students in and welcoming them into in-person classrooms are going to require us having some staffing changes. Up till now, we've had teachers either teaching virtual or teaching in person. Unlike some other school districts who have a combination of both, our professionals, for the most part, we're doing either one or the other. So that's going to, from a scheduling standpoint, as many of our virtual kids come back, that's going to be a little different for us. So we're just certainly have been asking for parents' patience and understanding in that. We're trying to get the information from parents as quickly as possible so that we can make as few changes as possible, but certainly some are going to be necessary. So between staffing and transportation, that's really where our first focus has to be in order for us to be successful.
So when the dust settles, it sounds like you'll have about 1,200 students back in class full time and about 200 still on virtual,
Yep.
completely until the end of the year for the last couple months. Yep.
Yes. If there's no major changes in any decisions of our families, that's approximately what the numbers will be. And we're looking at going full time for full days on the Tuesday after spring break, which is April the 6th. And our district will actually go virtual Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday before spring break. So all students will be instructed virtually. And then for the holiday of Thursday and Friday, that gives our staff and administration 5 full days in the building without students physically here to prepare our facility to welcome them back full time. And that's really going to be mainly putting in all of the barriers that are going to be necessary in the classrooms once we get a final number of kids. So that full week will allow us to kind of put furniture back in classrooms where necessary, because in some areas we have tables, in some areas we have desks, and there has to be a change there based on what we have in storage. So that's going to be when that is done. So once we get our plan in place, we're going to start really looking at what has to physically be done here. The barriers have been ordered at this point after my most recent meetings. So we are very optimistic that we'll get them in shortly and can start at least planning for their installation.
Well, I mean, it sounds like it's a very well thought out, methodical plan. So, I mean, I want to, on behalf of the community, actually, I guess, commend you, your staff, your leadership team, the community stakeholders, and others that all, took the time to come up with this. It's a hot topic, and as we often say to each other, we're never going to be able to please everybody based on what the circumstances are. And what you do is for the greater good. And clearly, I think the numbers bear out the fact that what you've served up as options and what you're going to transition to, though it's the perfect option and consideration to say, I still want my child to be home completely virtual. You have that option, you're providing it, but the vast majority are feeling comfortable enough to be able to, make this transition with you. So any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, I think you covered it. I certainly would like to thank the parents who are taking the time to be part of this conversation. It's so important. And absolutely all of my staff members, teachers, and all of my support staff, because again, you had referenced earlier that not every school district was in 5 days a week. In fact, the vast majority of school districts were not. Teachers were not rolling in to work in September 5 days a week. But since the start of the year, whether they're virtual or in person, our teachers have been here 5 days a week with very few exceptions. So this has been certainly a memorable year in all of our educational careers, but I think we've done a great job at sticking to the focus, which is the students. So certainly I'm thankful for that as well.
Well, Dr. Missy Peretti, Superintendent of the Harrison Township Elementary School District, actually you covered it, and I was glad to help facilitate it, and I know that our community as a whole is going to appreciate it. So great seeing you again. Thanks for the time.
You too. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay.